The point of view switches to Mr. Wu and his team who have arrived on the scene of the double dungeon. He assembled 7 elite hunters from the association who were available on short notice, but he already knew deep down inside they were not going to be enough to help Jinwoo. He was just preparing for a worst case scenario. Suddenly an ominous aura begins emanating from the gate. Mr. Wu begins shaking and his soldiers are starting to worry if he's okay or not. He thinks to himself, what is this? Is anyone else picking this up? Where is this bone-chilling aura coming from? I feel a terrible storm of mana. And behind him you see a Grim Reaper looking figure. He asks, are there any major guilds nearby on standby? Someone replies, yes, the Hunters Guild is on standby to raid. Mr. Wu responds, what about their 2 S-rank hunters? He says Mr. Choi Jong-in and Miss Cha Hae-in have both agreed to participate. He tells them to put an emergency request in with the Hunters Guild immediately. Then he thinks to himself, Jinwoo, what are you up to? The point of view switches back to the dungeon where we see Jinwoo staring down the hooded statue, and his arms are moving around side to side at almost a blurring speed. Jinwoo looks a little bit nervous but prepared. The statue cracks that devilish smile again, and then suddenly he disappears and reappears right in the face of Jinwoo. He immediately launches multiple punches that Jinwoo is narrowly able to block, but the hooded figure isn't done. He drives the punches through, which slams Jinwoo across the room. Jinwoo is visibly stunned, and honestly I can't remember the last time he's taken damage like this. The hooded figure gives him no time to think as he continues his assault. Jinwoo dodges the next round, but the fists keep coming and coming until he's caught in a flurry of punches from the statue's 8 arms. And he is not letting up. He is firing punch after punch. But suddenly that devilish grin turns to shock as he sees Jinwoo is blocking and dodging all of the punches he's firing at him. And you see the look in Jinwoo's eye went from being dazed to being completely locked in. The architect says, truly impressive, you were exceeding all my expectations. He finally manages to catch Jinwoo with the punch to the face, but Jinwoo doesn't allow it to give him an opening, and instead he returns the favor with the punch to the face as well. And this one sends the architect flying back. The architect says, who knew I'd have so much fun fighting against a human being? Not once in my many years of life did I think a human could be a worthy opponent. Then he smiles with a crazy look on his face, saying how very amusing. Jinwoo thinks to himself, this guy invited me here as soon as I reached level 101. He probably thought I was no match for him, but I can do this. Then he says, hey architect, I still got loads to ask you. Why did you construct the system? And why did you choose me as the player? And what's happening to the world right now? The architect says, you really want to know? I see. Maybe you think you might not get all the answers if you kill me. And at this point, he's launched himself back in Jinwoo's direction. Jinwoo says close combat puts me at a disadvantage. So to keep him at a distance, he activates Commander's authority. But the architect says, nah, are you planning to attack from a distance? It's no use. And he activates Commander's authority as well. And as you can see, it's almost as if the two canceled each other out. Jinwoo thinks to himself, he can use the same skills as me, and that means my long distance attacks are pointless too. The architect says it doesn't matter whether you kill me or not. And as he says this, you see the weapons of the falling soldiers slowly beginning to levitate. And he says the answers you will receive are already predetermined. And now with all 8 arms wielding weapon, he says they've been predetermined since the moment I first designed everything. And Jinwoo asks, how were you able to design all this? And how were you able to give me such powers? The architect says, I didn't choose you. In fact, I was against the idea. I am simply the architect and the moderator of the player breeding system. My design is perfect. Jinwoo checks the timer and there's about 6 minutes left and he thinks to himself, I don't have time, I have to face him head on. The architect leaps in the air and says, I'm going to use full force for the remaining time. He slams all 8 weapons onto the ground, creating a massive shockwave. Jinwoo leaps in the air himself to dodge the shockwave and now they're engaged in a clash. Then suddenly a spark awakens in Jinwoo and he's like, what is going on? All of my senses are getting stronger. I can actually do this. Then he begins counting out the weapons: longsword, spear, blade, axe, hammer. I can sense all his movements now. And as he's thinking this, he's dodging the architect's attacks almost effortlessly. And for the very first time, we see the architect visibly shaken up. He's thinking to himself, I'm using full force. How is he able to block all of my blows and then attack in response? And on top of that, he's getting even faster. And you see Jinwoo moving around so fast that he's barely visible, slicing off each of his 8 arms one by one. The architect says, even though I'm inside a fake body, I can't believe he's inflicting this much pain on me. And then he notices something about Jinwoo. He thinks to himself, could this be why you were chosen? There's only a fraction, but it's mixed in there, I see it. Then he yells in outrage, you're just a mere human, how dare you? The clock is now showing 3 minutes and 45 seconds and the stone soldiers that were already defeated are now coming back to life. Even the colossal laser beam statue begins to get active. The clock is winding down closer to 3 minutes and Jinwoo begins sprinting towards the giant. He remembers what happened last time he got active. He's like, I cannot let you do that shit again. He raises his hand to activate the commander's authority and slams his fist into the ground, sending all surrounding soldiers back. He continues his dash around and the giant tries to stop him with the fist, but he's way too fast. Jinwoo simply leaps around and keeps moving. At this point, I think he knows he has to end the architect before the time runs out. fuck all these other soldiers. He reaches the architect and severs off 2 more arms. But while doing so, the architect catches him with a slash to the stomach. Jinwoo reels in pain, but he doesn't let that slow anything down. Then suddenly he sees a familiar giant shield-bearing statue behind him. And he has a flashback to the first time he was in the double dungeon, and this one almost took his life. He instinctively launches himself in the air and smashes his elbow through his skull. The architect sees this and is visibly surprised, maybe even a little bit worried at this point. Jinwoo turns around and slices off 2 more arms. Then we see this massive explosion in the exact same spot where the 2 are. And when the dust settles, Jinwoo has his sword at the neck of the architect with 2 minutes and 14 seconds remaining. The architect submits. He says, "I've lost. The test is now over." Now defeated, the architect points at Jinwoo and says, "The answer is within you." Jinwoo replies, "Within me," and then you see the system offer a message that says the data stored in your memory will be retrieved, except yes or no. And the architect smiles and says, "The choice is yours." The message pops up again, "The data in your memory will be retrieved, except yes or no." And Jinwoo is confused. He said, "Data stored in my memory?" He thinks it over for a quick second, but of course we all know what his answer is going to be. "Yes," he says, "I accept." A new message pops up on the system. It says the data has been successfully retrieved, and we see a brilliant flash of light from either the architect or Jinwoo, or maybe both. It's kind of hard to tell. We see Jinwoo slowly falling into a trance, almost as if he's losing consciousness. He wakes up in an astral form in a completely different world, and below him are hordes, I mean hordes, of magic beasts. Jinwoo says, "Oh my god, look at all those magic beasts." When he focuses in, it's almost as if the magic beasts are staring at something. And he asks himself, what are they looking at? And then his eyes hone in on what they're looking at. Above them is a massive purple and black sky with multiple vortexes in the middle. And it looks very similar to the openings of gates. And again, there are literally magic beasts of all different types as far as the eye can see. Jinwoo says, "A purple sky and hordes of beasts. This can't be planet Earth." If this army made up of ice elves, high orcs, goblins, giants, and many other types of magic beasts were to break out of the gate all at once, the human race wouldn't stand a chance against them. And the funny thing is, they aren't even after humans. Suddenly the vortex in the sky begins to break. Then we're given words that feel like Jinwoo speaking in third person. It didn't take me long to figure out what would happen next. And then suddenly an army of some form of winged being breaks out of the gate and completely fills the skies above the horde of magic beasts. When you get a closer look, they're faceless, but they look very similar to angels. Jinwoo is completely stunned by what he's seeing. He has no thoughts or words. One of the winged beings lifts a horn to his lips and begins letting that motherfucker ring. And everybody around knew what that meant. The war begins now. The beasts rallied together to fight against the silver soldiers, and chaos ensued. The sounds of clashing weapons and crushed armor filled the air. Pools of blood began to stain the battlefield as the war cries quickly turned into screams of agony. The silver soldiers were beyond powerful. They were completely dominating the battle, but just as the end drew near for the beast, the silver soldiers suddenly came to a halt one by one. The battlefield went from chaotic to silent in an instant, to the point where you could hear the hooves of a lone horse. And when we finally see the horse, it looks very similar to Jinwoo's shadows. And then we hear that iconic phrase, "Wakey wakey." My bad, y'all, I couldn't help myself. "Arise." Now mind you, Jinwoo was watching this from above the entire time, and at this point he's like, what the fuck is going on? Notices the monarch's domain seeping across the battlefield, immediately followed by something he knows all too well, shadow extraction. Then slowly but surely we start to see all the failed magic beasts reanimated in that black and purple shadowy color. Jinwoo thinks to himself, does this mean he's a monarch of shadows? Finally shown an image of the man who said arise, and he's wearing ironclad from head to toe. While riding his shadow steed, I'm not gonna lie, he might be going aura for aura with Jinwoo right now. Then we're shown the words immortality, an army that never dies. Magic beasts sacrificed their lives, but death wasn't the end for them. Their blood grew dark and dense, granting them a newfound strength. In the skies above, Jinwoo marvels at how many shadow soldiers he's able to summon. He says to himself, I'm nothing compared to him. Which doesn't sound very aura-like of Jinwoo, I understand, but in his defense, y'all saw how many magic beasts were in that horde. Literally as far as the eye can see, and so many that it just looks like a sea of black and red. The fallen beasts emerge from death's embrace and storm towards the silver soldiers. We're shown the magic beasts regenerating after being attacked by the silver soldiers. Black and silver armies became entangled in a fierce battle. Explosions erupted and the ground shook beneath them. The appearance of a single individual turned the tides. And we're shown this mysterious Shadow Monarch, this time donning a gigantic blade. With that blade, he's able to slash multiple silver soldiers at a time. He's just riding his shadowy horse, decimating the enemy lines. He reaches out with a very familiar looking glowing purple hand. In front of him, multiple enemies are crushed out the air and slammed on the ground. Jinwoo, again watching from above, says that's the commander's authority. Shadow soldiers repeated the cycle of death and revival to wipe out their enemies. Wherever the monarch went, a trail of destruction was left in his wake. Victory seemed imminent for the monarch of shadows and magic beasts. It is, until they showed up. One of you then switches back to the gates of the double dungeon. Choi Jong-in asks Mr. Woo, "Are we sure about this? I'm sensing a tremendous amount of mana, and you said Sung Jinwoo's inside, right?" Mr. Woo says, "Yes, I'm sure of it." Chae-in says, "This mana isn't Sung Jinwoo's. But then who does it belong to?" Continues, "A double dungeon, huh? I guess I'll finally be able to see if the rumors are true." Mr. Woo says, "Sung Jinwoo told me he wasn't the one who cleared the double dungeon." We're shown a flashback of when Jinwoo first came out the dungeon and he was getting questioned about what the hell happened. Makes Mr. Woo question, so then, why did he come back here? It can't just be a coincidence, he says as they push open the doors. Almost immediately, Choi Jong is like, "What the hell is that? What is this place?" All you see is the wreckage of Jinwoo's battle versus the architect. Mr. Woo says, "So it's true. The statue of God and the stone sculptures actually exist." And suddenly they hear the voice of the architect say, "Oh, what is this? I don't recall inviting humans here." Another unexpected surprise. Hunters are completely freaked out because they've never heard a magic beast speak. They say, "Am I hearing things, or did that magic beast just talk?" Another one says, "It knows the human language?" The architect says, "How dare you disturb the king in his slumber?" Everyone's confused. They're like, "King, what?" The point of view pans to Sung Jinwoo, who is standing in the middle of the room glowing. One of the hunters says, "It's Sung Jinwoo. What is he doing over there?" Before he can finish his sentence, he gets hit with a slash faster than the eye can track. The architect went through and attacked 3 out of the 6 people there. Mr. Woo, Chae-in, and Choi Jong. Chae, stunned and confused, gathers her stance to prepare for battle. I think what happened was he tried to attack all 6 but only connected with the weaker hunters. The chapter saying, "You strong humans will make an excellent first offering to the king." The point of view switches back to Sung Jinwoo and the other mysterious Shadow Monarch. Suddenly in the sky above their heads, 2 large gates open up, one red and one blue. The blue gate cracks first and you slowly begin to see the flags of an army marching out. Now a third army is entering the battle, this time clad in demon armor. This is familiar to Sung Jinwoo. He says the Ricardo, Pitos, Roken, Ingress, and even the Rediro clan Isul belong to. Before he could even make sense of what marched through the blue gate, the red gate began to crack as well. This time with a giant white wolf bursting through, and behind him a brand new horde of magic beasts. We're shown the leader of the demon army who came through the blue gate wearing white clad armor. So alongside the demon army is a brand new army of magic beasts and a giant white wolf. And we're shown the mysterious Shadow Monarch staring both armies down. Point of view switches back to the double dungeon where the healers are trying to help out their fallen comrades. Choi Jong-in is taking command. He said, "Use everything you got, heal them and move them back to the back." At the bottom you see 2 healers currently working on Myung-ko. Suddenly more stone soldiers arise and they're making their way towards the hunters. Behind them is the giant stone statue that even gave Jinwoo problems. Architect says, "Anyone who's still alive by the time all my puppets collapse will be given the great honor of witnessing the king's birth." The giant statue's eyes begin to glow as he prepares to fire a laser. Architect adds, "That is, provided any of you actually survive until the time is up." Choi Jong is the first one to see what's going on. He tells everyone to watch out. The giant fires his laser beam and we see it slowly moving closer and closer to the hunters. Not gonna lie, for the first time ever, Choi Jong gets active. He snaps his fingers and fires one of the biggest explosions he can muster, which does just enough to halt the path of the giant's laser beams. Then tells his comrades to use this chance to destroy the stone statues. Then see Mr. Woo spring into action. He launches himself in the direction of the nearest statue and punches him in the face. He quickly finds out that these statues are a lot sturdier than they look. Choi Jong follows up with a fire blast that gives Mr. Woo some time to escape. He alerts his team that these guys have a high resistance to physical attacks. Dust settles on the face of the soldier he just attacked and he realizes that they can withstand fire magic as well. This makes him question, does this mean they also have a resistance to spell attacks? 2 of the other hunters alerted Choi Jong that they're experiencing the same situation. The male hunter said, "None of my provocation skills are working on them." The lady hunter said, "My basic psychokinetic spells don't have any effect either. They won't budge." Jong says, "Does this mean we're all out of options?" He looks at Sung Jinwoo and says, "We have to wake him up." Wonders if he's been hypnotized or something, but there's no time for that. Fires a blast in his direction and says, "Well, whatever it is, this is the only way to wake him up right now." Just as the blast is about to hit Sung Jinwoo, something intercepts it. Choi Jong-in is taken aback by what he sees. The architect jumped in the line of fire to protect Sung Jinwoo from the blast. And now while launching himself in the direction of Mr. Choi, he says, "How dare you try to disturb the king's slumber." Right before he can connect with Mr. Choi, he too is intercepted. At the very last second, Mr. Woo and 2 other hunters manage to push the architect back. Mr. Woo then gives orders to Chae-in. He tells her to go wake Sung Jinwoo up while we distract the architect. Chae-in is the fastest person there, so it makes the most sense. She says got it and heads towards Sung Jinwoo's location. From her point of view, we see her getting closer and closer to where Sung Jinwoo is standing. And then just as she gets close enough to wake him up, the point of view switches back to astral Sung Jinwoo. All-out battle has now ensued between the Shadow Army and the Magic Beast Army. Jinwoo said the shadows keep on regenerating no matter how many times they get destroyed. If those had been my soldiers, I would have run out of mana a while ago. It's almost as if he's a bottomless pit of mana. At this point, Jinwoo is a little bit confused with what he's saying. Demon tribes and magic beasts that came out of the gates are now slaughtering the shadow soldiers, but it didn't seem like they had a reason to fight each other. This war was between the beasts and the silver soldiers. Jinwoo starts to come to a realization. He says, so the Monarch of Shadows wasn't on the same side as the magic beasts? Or maybe there was some sort of internal conflict? The war continued to rage on until there seemed to be a clear victor between the demon army and the shadow army. The leader of the demon clans is now on the ground, and we see the Shadow Monarch slowly walking in his direction. He says, we had a chance to end this war today, so why did you betray me? The leader of the demon clans laughs and says, what a shame, I could have done away with you. Shadow Monarch repeats his question, why did you betray me? Demon leader laughs again, and we start to see whatever he's saying glitch. At this point, it's a little bit hard to tell if the Shadow Monarch can understand what he's saying. Suddenly, the Shadow Monarch grabs the demon leader by the neck, and the point of view switches from third person to first person. The leader of the demon clans is still speaking in a language or a way or a glitch that we can't understand. Shadow Monarch pauses for a quick second and proceeds to squeeze the life out of the demon. And while the life is being squeezed out of his body, we see Sung Jinwoo say, those eyes, where have I seen them? He drops him to the ground and removes his mask. When he lifts his head, Jinwoo knows exactly who he is. It's Baran, the Demon King. He questions to himself, what is Baran doing here? Something weird is going on, and Jinwoo starts to notice the point of view change. He begins to evaluate his own hands that have now been bloodied from battle. Somehow he is taking the place of the Shadow Monarch, and he thinks to himself, since when? Why did I notice until now? A purple orb begins to glow on the right side of his chest. It pushes itself deeper and deeper into Sung Jinwoo's body, until it reached the point of being snuggled directly adjacent to his heart. Jinwoo is confused and trying to figure out what exactly is going on, but he doesn't have time for that. As more silver soldiers just pulled up and it's time to get back to the action. It is until suddenly the system sends a message and says playback of the retrieved data has ended. The point of view switches back to the double dungeon where the hunters are struggling against the architect. He says, you're quite amusing indeed. Try a bit harder to break free from my design, why don't you? Chahae, determined to wake Sung Jinwoo up, unleashes her famous sword dance. Amused, the architect says, there you go, just like that, and manages to block all her attacks with one sword while slashing her in the shoulder with the other. Laughing, he says, is that all you got? Well, I guess there won't be any deviations after all. You humans never fail to disappoint. The system I built can predict and respond to any outcome. Such feeble attempts will never kill my creation. I suppose this is the best you can do. The architect is suddenly hit with a blast on the side of his head mid-yap sesh. Choi Jong was the one who fired the blast, and he said, we must wake up Sung Jinwoo, it's the only way to defeat him. Although still injured, almost instinctively, Chahae dashes towards Sung Jinwoo. The architect again intercepts her and blocks her path, while also drawing a literal line in the sand. So you managed to dodge my attack, huh? Not bad. All of a sudden, the architect notices something he didn't see before. Attached to the end of Chahae's shoulder is a shadow. He says the rules of this room don't allow for such scenes to come forth, but without a doubt that is a shadow. You think the king planted one of his soldiers on you? How did you all find this place? What is your relationship to Sung Jinwoo? Chahae responds, we're his friends and we're here to rescue him. The architect smiles and said, perhaps it wasn't the king's doing, but alright, I'll give you a chance. Today, one of the great monarchs will descend upon this world, and I'm going to give you a chance to witness this glorious event. However, all of your little human friends will die right here, right now. Just as he's about to make his move, he hears someone from behind him say, not on my watch. Before he even has a chance to turn around and see who's speaking, a fist slams into his jaw and shatters it completely. Of course, that fist belonging to none other than Sung Jinwoo. Enraged, Sung Jinwoo says, what have you done to my body? Mr. Woo is just staring mouth wide open in shock. While Choi Jong and Chahae are just relieved because now Sung Jinwoo is here to save the day. Sung Jinwoo uses the king's authority to slam the monarch on the ground, and he stands on him with his foot on his chest looking down. The architect says, it seems you're not the king, but why? Why are you here instead of him? How are you able to maintain consciousness even with that black heart? As he says black heart, you hear the ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum of the heart beating. Jinwoo says, black heart, huh? So this is where that crazy amount of mana came from. The system sends a message explaining what's going on. Title, Demon Hunter. You have met all the requirements. You have recalled your defeat of the Demon King Baran, the Monarch of the White Flames. An incredible power has acknowledged the player and its master. Effect, black heart. Plus 100,000 mana. And we're shown Jinwoo's now permanently purple eyes reading the message. Thinks to himself, judging by his reaction, I can deduce two things. The black heart isn't a product of this guy's grand scheme, and also it was never meant to strengthen my powers. The retrieved data didn't give me all the answers. I haven't heard the full story yet. Out loud he says, "You said you were against choosing me as a player. But what exactly is a player? And what were you trying to do to me?" Architect says, "Could it be?" And now visibly enraged, he says, "Monarch of Shadows, how could you do this to us? Think the other monarchs will let you get away with this?" Point of view pans to Jinwoo. We see multiple swords materializing out of thin air. Swords point themselves at the architect, who was fearing for his life, and Jinwoo says, "Just answer my questions." While laughing, the architect says, "You're an unpredictable one, aren't you? I think I understand now why you were chosen." The point of view pans to the hunters, who are now starting to freak out because the stone statues are reanimating again. Even the ones that were still before are now coming to life. Stone statues have created a circle around the hunters, and now the architect is saying, "If I die, then no one will be able to stop my puppets. You still think you can kill me?" Sung Jinwoo with murderous intent says, "What if I killed you and managed to defeat your puppets as well?" He responds, "I'm the architect of this system. If you were to kill me..." Sung Jinwoo finishes his sentence by saying, "I'd return to being an E-rank hunter?" See, I thought about that, but an existing system doesn't fall apart when its creator vanishes now, does it? The architect begins panicking as Sung Jinwoo just called his bluff. Suddenly, the system notifications begin to go haywire as the architect tries to override it. But at this point, the system has evolved beyond his control and is denying the administrators access. The architect asks himself, "Why is the system denying me?" Jinwoo says, "You know, I once thought to myself," and then there's a pause. Shown a montage of all the times Sung Jinwoo's questioned whether or not he's being used by the system, and all the times he decided to also use the system as well. Then he says, "I will swallow the system whole. But lucky for me, it seems your design is full of flaws." Architect yells, "How dare you!" Before he can finish his yap session, Sung Jinwoo completely eviscerates him. And as he's crumbled to dust, he offers his last words, "Let me make a prediction, no, a prophecy. When the pillars of fire supporting the skies are erected, an unavoidable death will come and find you." Jinwoo thinks about it for a second, and then he replies, "So be it." Point of view switches to the hunters waiting outside the double dungeon. One of them says, "It's already been over an hour since the Hunters Guild went inside. What's taking them so long?" Apparently more guilds have pulled up since Mr. Wu's team went in, because another one says if our guild went in instead, we would have been totally screwed. Suddenly we see Mr. Wu's team begin to come out of the gate. Everyone's severely injured with extremely low morale. I can't believe the elite members of the Hunters Guild look so beat up. What in the world happened inside that C-rank gate? Mr. Wu says, "You guys are from the Courage Guild, right? Can you help us transport all our casualties?" Courage Guild member says, "Yes, of course." Last person to walk out the gate was Sung Jinwoo, still contemplating everything that just transpired. The real architect is probably somewhere else, he thought. I got some answers, but not all. I don't think he would have stuck around long enough to tell me everything anyways. Mr. Wu reports that 20 of the highest ranking hunters died in action. That being said, they would have suffered unimaginable damage had the dungeon break occurred. He asked Mr. Wu, "You're telling me you attempted to clear this double dungeon all by yourself?" Jinwoo thinks to himself, "I asked the Courage Guild to report the double dungeon, but I didn't think anyone would actually show up. I'm the reason these hunters died today." He's thinking this while looking down at the bodies of all the hunters that didn't make it out. He says to Mr. Wu, "I survived thanks to the Hunters Guild and the surveillance team." Mr. Wu says the surveillance team is always notified when an S-rank takes action. The decision to ask the Hunters Guild for their cooperation was mine, although the results were quite tragic this time around. He turns his curiosity to Sung Jinwoo. "How did you know that there was a double dungeon here?" Jinwoo responds candidly, "The dungeon called out to me." And Mr. Wu was like, "Called out? What do you mean?" He says, "I received a message telling me to come here." And Mr. Wu asks to look at that message, and Sung Jinwoo says it's something that only I can see. Mr. Wu thinks to himself, "I doubt he's joking considering how many deaths there's been. I just can't get a read on this guy." Tae-in approaches Sung Jinwoo and asks him if he's alright, to which he responds, "Yeah, I'm good." And suddenly he starts to feel a little bit wobbly, and he's like, "Wait, maybe I'm not good?" Now that I think about it, I am kind of tired, he thinks to himself as he slowly loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Mr. Wu managed to catch him before he hit the ground and summoned the healing team to help him out. Point of view switches to Japan, where they're preparing for the Red Gate dungeon break. Yuri requested they gathered as many mana crystals as they could and planted them in various places in the city under the gate. Yuri says 200,000 tons of mana crystals. This should be more than enough for the magic circle. Once I build a barrier around the gate, it'll start drawing in mana from the crystals. At that point, the magic circle will be self-sufficient. Then suddenly catches Yuri's attention. He says, how strange. Japanese assistant assigned to him asks if there's a problem. He says no, the barrier is perfect. However, since an unknown presence nearby, he says, now looking suspicious with his eyes glowing. At this point, the Japanese assistant is confused because Yuri is yelling out, "Who are you? Show yourself!" He waits for an answer or response but receives none. And the assistant says, "Would someone really have the guts to be out here in the streets when the dungeon break is tomorrow?" Mr. Yuri said, I never said it was a person. And now the assistant is even more confused than ever. In the next panel, if you look very, very closely, there is a dark figure standing on top of a building like Batman. Point of view pans the said figure and he says, a man with sharp senses. Well, I guess there's nothing strange about that considering where his power comes from. Closer point of view reveals this to be Sung Il-won, Sung Jinwoo's father, and he says, regardless, it finally begins. Everything seems to be going according to plan, which means tragedy is afoot. The point of view switches to 3 nearby S-rankers who are assessing their situation. At this point, they've called every available hunter and the army for the worst case scenario. The lady hunter says modern firearms are highly ineffective against beasts, so I just don't see the point in mobilizing an army. Male hunter replies, if Yuri Orlov's strategy fails, someone needs to buy the frontline hunters some time to prepare for an attack. He responds, so they're just human shields pretty much. He says, as long as we're stationed at the front lines, we hunters are no different. Just goes to show how helpless humans are in the face of pure destruction. Point of view switches back to Yuri Orlov. He says, perfect, this is great. If all goes well, I'll have this gate taken care of all by myself. It would be great if I could be known as the man who single-handedly brought down an S-rank gate. But there's another hunter who fits that title better, and I shouldn't be so overambitious. He says he takes a swig of his alcohol. The Japanese representative chastises him about drinking alcohol, but he says, I'm just trying to calm the nerves. I'm also about to put on the greatest show you've ever seen, so this calls for a toast. He asks how many S-ranks are on standby, to which the representative responds, there are 15 in total. Quite a small audience, huh? What are the Americans doing? Did they not send Japan any S-rank hunters? And the rep responds, well, an S-rank gate has spawned on their soil as well, in the state of Maryland to be exact. That's not all. S-rank gates have spawned in the United Kingdom, India, and many more nations besides Japan. He responds, I see. So countries all over the world are suffering from a shortage of good hunters. The representative notices something's happening at the gate and the conversation is brought to a complete halt. Loud and ominous chatter just alerted the city that the gate is finally opened. Point of view switches to Sung Jinwoo, who just woke up in the middle of a hospital. He's still very dazed and confused, but Jinho explains that he's been knocked out for 3 days. Jinwoo ponders to himself, 3 whole days? Did I really build up that much fatigue? Well, I guess I haven't taken a break in a while. But more importantly, I keep thinking about the war the architect guy showed me. I can't get it out of my head. Wait, hold on. I've been asleep for 3 whole days. Then that means... Jinho, give me an update, he says out loud. Jinho's like, an update on what? S-rank gate in Japan. What happened to it? And Jinho's kind of like, oh, yikes. Well, one of you switches to a flashback of what must have occurred over the 3 days he was asleep. The red gate just broke and both the Army and Japanese Hunters Association are standing in complete and utter shock. An army of giants had just began walking through the gate. Frightened, one of the hunters says, but they usually appear as bosses of only the highest level of A-rank gates. Why are they here and why are there so many? Yuri scoffs at the sight of the giants and says, this will be easy peasy. Bro really said easy peasy, those are his words, not mine. With a glowing green hand, he yells, come at me. Then we're shown him pulling mana from the crystal to create this shield that he's so famous for. We're shown the red gate going from being wide open to completely encapsulated by Yuri's abilities. Axe in hand, one of the giants begins attacking the shield. And Yuri starts laughing. He says, beasts that are commonly found in a measly A-rank gate. Who would have thought? Pipsqueaks think you can break through my barrier? And suddenly an even larger hand grabs the head of the giant who's trying to smash through the barrier. Yuri's cockiness quickly turns to petrified fear. An even bigger giant throws the giant who was trying to break through the barrier by the face, and using an obnoxiously long sword, slices through Yuri's barrier in one swing. For the first time since we were introduced to Yuri, he's at a complete loss for words.